Have you ever witnessed the moment when pride crumbles before truth? When someone who seems to have everything discovers they've been building on sand? Today's narrative plunges into the depths of mockery and humiliation, but carries within it a transformative message about humility, grace, and the unexpected ways God works through those the world considers least important. What you're about to read may challenge everything you believe about power, success, and who truly holds wisdom in this world. The mop slapped against marble. Thomas Whitmore, 62 years old with silver hair thinning at the crown, guided it across the pristine floor of Meridian Financial's executive hallway. His blue maintenance overalls, worn soft from countless washings, bore his name embroidered in yellow thread above the left pocket. The morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows that danced with each sweep of his mop. 5 men in tailored suits stood near the glass conference room, their conversation a low murmur punctuated by occasional laughter. Thomas recognized them all, the senior management team who arrived early every Tuesday for their strategic planning sessions. At the center stood Director Harrison Blackthorne, 43, with perfectly styled dark hair and a navy suit that probably cost more than Thomas made in 3 months. The director's voice carried that particular tone of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. "Good morning, gentlemen," Thomas said quietly as he approached, planning to work around them. Harrison glanced over, and his lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Well, if it isn't our resident philosopher." The other executives, Stephen, Daniel, Robert, and Michael, shifted uncomfortably. "Tell me, Thomas, did your God give you any special revelations while you were cleaning the toilets yesterday?" Thomas paused, his weathered hands steady on the mop handle. "Every honest day's work is a prayer, Mr. Blackthorne." "Is that so?" Harrison's voice dripped condescension. "How wonderfully quaint. You know, I've always been fascinated by how people cling to fairy tales when their lives amount to—" He gestured at the mop bucket. "This." Stephen, the youngest of the executives at 31, cleared his throat. "Harrison, the meeting—" "In a moment." Harrison stepped closer to Thomas, his Italian leather shoes inches from the wet floor. "You've been here, 15 years? Mopping the same floors, emptying the same trash cans, watching people like us actually build something meaningful. And you still believe some cosmic father figure has a plan for you?" Thomas met his gaze steadily. 16 years next month. And yes, sir, I do." "Remarkable." Harrison turned to his colleagues with theatrical amazement. "Gentlemen, observe the power of delusion. This man has convinced himself that his menial existence has cosmic significance. It's almost admirable, really, like a child who still believes in Santa Claus at 60. Robert, the CFO, checked his watch nervously. "We should really—" "You know what I find most amusing?" Harrison continued, ignoring the interruption. "Every Tuesday, I see you reading that worn Bible during your break. Same book, same promises, same disappointments. When will you realize that no one's listening, Thomas? That you're talking to yourself? Faith isn't about getting answers, Mr. Blackthorne. Sometimes it's about trusting through the silence." Harrison laughed, sharp and cutting. "How poetic. Did you read that on a greeting card?" He pulled out his phone, checking the time on its diamond-encrusted case. "Listen, I'm sure this is all very meaningful to you, but some of us have actual work to do. Work that matters. Work that changes lives." Thomas nodded slowly, wringing his mop. "I understand, sir." "Do you? Do you really?" Harrison's voice rose slightly. "Because from where I stand, you're a relic, a man who's wasted his life on his knees. And I don't mean in prayer, though I suppose that's been equally pointless." The other executives stood frozen, a tableau of discomfort in expensive suits. The morning light caught the water on the floor, creating tiny prisms that neither Thomas nor Harrison noticed. "I'll let you gentlemen get to your meeting," Thomas said quietly, pushing his bucket toward the service elevator. "That's right, run along," Harrison called after him. "Maybe if you pray hard enough, God will promote you to toilet scrubber first class." The service elevator doors closed on Harrison's laughter and the uncomfortable silence of his colleagues. Inside the elevator, Thomas closed his eyes briefly. Lord, whatever you're doing in that man's life, give me the strength to be part of your plan, not mine. The executive conference room hummed with tension as the 5 men settled around the polished mahogany table. Harrison stood at the head, his confidence radiating like heat from pavement in summer. The wall-mounted screens displayed quarterly projections and market analyses in crisp detail. Now then, Harrison began, straightening his tie, let's discuss something that actually matters, the Singapore acquisition. Daniel, the head of international markets, opened his laptop. The preliminary numbers look strong, but there are some concerns about regulatory... Harrison's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. Unknown number, probably spam. He declined the call and turned back to the presentation. As I was saying, regulatory concerns are for people who lack vision. The phone buzzed again, same unknown number. Popular today, aren't we? Stephen remarked. Harrison silenced the phone entirely. Where were we? Ah, yes, the expansion timeline. I want us to move aggressively. Fortune favors the bold, gentlemen, not those who sit around waiting for divine intervention. Michael pulled up a spreadsheet. The due diligence team has identified several risk factors. Risk? Harrison scoffed. The only risk is inaction. While our competitors are praying for miracles, we're making them happen. That's the difference between winners and, he paused dramatically, janitors. Robert shifted in his seat. Harrison, about what happened earlier. What about it? I simply stated facts. That man has deluded himself into thinking his meaningless existence has purpose. It's sad, really, but not our problem. The conference room door burst open. Harrison's assistant, Patricia, stood there, her face pale, clutching her phone. Mr. Blackthorne, I'm sorry to interrupt, but... Patricia, we're in the middle of... It's Memorial Hospital. They've been trying to reach you. It's about Emma. The color drained from Harrison's face. Emma, his 7-year-old daughter. What about Emma? His voice cracked slightly. There's been an accident at her school. A playground structure collapsed. They said you need to come immediately. The spreadsheets, the acquisition, the morning's arrogance, everything evaporated. Harrison grabbed his phone, seeing 12 missed calls from the unknown number. The hospital. I have to go. He was already moving toward the door, his hands shaking as he tried to call his wife. No answer. Harrison, we'll handle everything here, Daniel said. Go. The drive to Memorial Hospital took 12 minutes. Harrison ran 3 red lights and nearly collided with a delivery truck. His mind raced with images of Emma, her laugh when he pushed her on the swings, her tiny hand in his during their Sunday walks, the only day he made time for her, her drawing of their family she'd given him last week that still sat unopened on his desk. Please, he whispered to no one, to anyone, to the universe he'd always claimed was indifferent. Please, not her. Take anything else. Take everything else. Yet the emergency room erupted in controlled chaos as Harrison burst through the doors. A nurse directed him to Trauma Bay 3, where a team of doctors surrounded a small form on a gurney. Through gaps in their movement, he glimpsed Emma's pale face, a breathing tube taped to her mouth, monitors beeping in ominous rhythm. Dr. Amanda Chen. No, Dr. Amanda Reeves. He corrected himself even in panic, looked up. Mr. Blackthorne, I'm Dr. Reeves, head of pediatric trauma. Emma suffered severe head trauma when the structure collapsed. She's stable for now, but... She paused, choosing her words carefully. The next 24 hours are critical. We're doing everything we can. What are her chances? The question tore from his throat. It's difficult to say. The swelling in her brain is significant. We've induced a coma to give her the best chance of recovery, but... Dr. Reeves placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. I want to be honest with you. You should prepare yourself for any outcome. Harrison's legs gave out. He collapsed into a plastic chair, his expensive suit suddenly feeling like a costume, a ridiculous pretense. Can I see her? Once we move her to the ICU, about 30 minutes. 30 minutes, 1,800 seconds. He'd wasted more time than that mocking Thomas this morning, pontificating about meaninglessness while his daughter, his everything, had been laughing on a playground, minutes away from... His phone rang. His wife, Melissa, calling from her business trip in Seattle. "Harrison, I just got your messages. What's happening? Is Emma... There was an accident." He could barely form the words. The playground equipment at her school, it collapsed. She's in critical condition. Dane, the sound Melissa made wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of a heart breaking across 3,000 miles. "I'm getting on the next flight," she managed. "Harrison, she's going to be okay, right? Tell me she's going to be okay." He couldn't. The man who always had answers, who never doubted his own judgment, who scorned uncertainty as weakness, he had nothing. "I don't know," he whispered. The ICU was a symphony of machines, each beep and hiss marking time in a new currency Harrison had never understood. The precious, irreplaceable seconds of a life hanging by threads thinner than spider silk. Emma looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her head wrapped in white bandages, tubes and wires connecting her to devices Harrison didn't understand, despite all his supposed intelligence. He sat beside her, holding her hand. It was so small, so still. He remembered when she was born, how her entire fist couldn't wrap around his index finger, how he'd promised her he'd always protect her, always be there. How many school plays had he missed? How many bedtime stories had he been too busy to read? "Emma, baby, Daddy's here," he whispered. I'm so sorry for everything." A soft knock on the door. Harrison looked up, expecting a nurse or doctor. Instead, Thomas stood there in his blue overalls, holding a small, worn Bible and a cup of coffee from the hospital cafeteria. "What are you doing here?" Harrison's voice held no anger, only confusion. "Heard about the accident on the news during my break. Thought you might need this." Thomas set the coffee on the side table. "Black, no sugar. Notice that's how you take it. You came here for me, after what I said?" Thomas pulled up a chair, his movements careful and deliberate. "Mr. Blackthorne, I've been where you are. Different circumstances, but the same place." He looked at Emma with gentle eyes. "My son, David, 23 years ago, motorcycle accident." Harrison stared at him. "I didn't know you had a son. Not many people do. He was 19, full of life, full of dreams, gone in an instant." Thomas's weathered hands folded over his Bible. "I raged at God, screamed at him, told him he was cruel, indifferent, everything you said this morning. Maybe worse. What happened? David didn't make it." The words came out simple, matter of fact, but Harrison could hear the ocean of pain beneath them. But in those last hours, something changed. Not in David, in me. I realized I'd been so busy building my empire. Yes, I had one once, small construction company, that I'd missed his life. 18 years of being too important for little league games, too successful for family dinners. Harrison's throat constricted. How do you keep believing after that? Because in my darkest moment, when I had nothing left, I discovered something. Faith isn't about getting what we want. It's about finding meaning in what we're given, even when it's loss. Especially when it's loss. Thomas opened his Bible, its pages soft with years of handling. "Would you mind if I read something?" Harrison nodded, unable to speak. Thomas read quietly, his voice steady. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." He looked up. "I used to think that meant God would keep death away. Now I know it means he walks with us through it. We're never alone, even in the valley." "I mocked you," Harrison said, tears flowing freely now. "I called your faith meaningless. You were in pain you didn't even know you were carrying. Pain from running so fast you couldn't stop to feel it." Thomas reached over and placed his hand on Harrison's shoulder. "But you're feeling it now, and that's where healing starts." A monitor beeped irregularly. Emma's hand twitched slightly in Harrison's grasp. She moved, Harrison gasped. She moved. Dr. Reeves rushed in, checking the monitors. Her brain activity is increasing. This is good, very good. She's fighting. Harrison looked at Thomas, then at Emma, then at something beyond the ceiling tiles and fluorescent lights. Please, he said, and for the first time in his adult life, he wasn't talking to himself. Please. The next hours blurred together. Thomas stayed, sometimes reading quietly from his Bible, sometimes just sitting in companionable silence. Other executives arrived. Stephen brought sandwiches nobody ate. Daniel handled Harrison's meetings. Robert coordinated with the insurance company. Michael fielded calls from concerned clients. They formed an unlikely vigil, suits and overalls united in hope. At 3:47 in the afternoon, Emma's eyes fluttered open. "Daddy?" Her voice was tiny, confused. Harrison sobbed, pressing her hand to his cheek. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "My head hurts." "I know, sweetheart. You had an accident, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay." Dr. Reeves performed test after test, each result bringing more relief. "The swelling is reducing faster than we expected. Her responses are strong. She's got a long recovery ahead, but—" She smiled. "I think we can be cautiously optimistic." Harrison turned to Thomas, who was quietly gathering his things to leave. "Wait, please." Thomas paused at the door. "Thank you," Harrison said, the words inadequate but sincere. "For coming, for staying, for showing me what I couldn't see." "You would have found it eventually," Thomas replied. "Sometimes we just need someone to sit with us in the valley until our eyes adjust to the dark. I owe you an apology, a public one." Thomas shook his head. "You owe me nothing, Mr. Blackthorne. Just be present for her. That's all any of us can do. Be present." The next morning, Harrison arrived at the office late. He'd spent the night at the hospital, watching Emma sleep, memorizing the rhythm of her breathing. Melissa had arrived on the red-eye flight, and they'd cried together, prayed together, something they hadn't done since their wedding day. The executive team was already assembled in the conference room. They looked up as he entered, concern etched on their faces. "Harrison, how is she?" Daniel asked. "Recovering. It'll be a long road, but she's going to make it." He remained standing, his hands gripping the back of his chair. "Gentlemen, I need to say something." They waited. "Yesterday morning, I humiliated a good man. I mocked his faith, his work, his life. I stood in that hallway and proclaimed myself superior because of this." He gestured at the opulent conference room, while dismissing him because of his overalls. Stephen shifted uncomfortably. "Harrison, you were just—" "I was wrong." And the words came out clear, decisive. "Thomas Whitmore has more wisdom in his mop bucket than I have in all my spreadsheets. When my world collapsed yesterday, when everything I thought mattered turned to ash, he was the one who showed up. The man I ridiculed came to sit with me in my darkest hour." He walked to the window, looking down at the city below. "We talk about value creation, about meaningful work, about changing lives. But what value did I create yesterday morning? What meaning was in my cruelty? Whose life did I change for the better?" The room was silent. "I'm calling an all-hands meeting for this afternoon," Harrison continued. "I'm going to apologize to Thomas publicly. And I'm going to propose something else, a new position, Chief of Facilities and Employee Well-Being. Someone who actually knows every person in this building, who understands what they need, who they trust. Someone who's been serving others while I've been serving myself." "You want to promote the janitor?" Robert asked, incredulous. "I want to recognize that he's been doing more than cleaning floors. He's been holding this place together in ways we never noticed. Did you know he's talked 3 different employees through personal crises this year? That he organized the informal support group for staff dealing with family medical issues? That he uses his own break time to teach English to our immigrant maintenance staff?" The executives exchanged glances. "I didn't either," Harrison admitted, "because I was too busy being important to notice what was actually important. That afternoon, the main conference hall filled with Meridian Financial's 200 employees. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Harrison took the podium, Thomas standing near the back in his blue overalls, uncomfortable with the attention. "Good afternoon, everyone. I called this meeting to address something that happened yesterday. Something that reflects not just on me, but on the culture we've created here." Harrison's voice carried through the room without the usual corporate polish. "Yesterday morning, I publicly humiliated one of our colleagues. I mocked his faith, his work, and his dignity. I did it to feel superior, to reinforce my own importance." The room was dead silent. Thomas Whitmore has worked here for 16 years. In that time, he's never missed a day, never complained, never failed to greet each of you with respect and kindness. And yesterday, when my daughter was fighting for her life in the hospital, when my carefully constructed world was crumbling, Thomas was the one who came. The man I had mocked hours earlier sat with me, comforted me, shared his own pain to help me bear mine. Harrison's voice cracked. He paused, collecting himself. "I'm not just apologizing for yesterday. I'm apologizing for 16 years of walking past him like he was invisible. For creating a culture where we measure worth by salary bands and office size instead of character and compassion." He looked directly at Thomas. "Thomas, I'm deeply, profoundly sorry. You deserved better from me. You deserved better from all of us." Thomas nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "But apologies without action are just words," Harrison continued. "Effective immediately. I'm creating a new position. Chief of Facilities and Employee Well-Being. It comes with a significant salary increase and a mandate to ensure that every person in this building, from the mailroom to the boardroom, is valued and heard. Thomas, I'm offering you this position if you'll accept it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Thomas stood frozen, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. "I know it's sudden," Harrison added. "Take your time to think about it. But know that this isn't charity or guilt. This is recognition that you've been doing this job already, without the title or compensation. You've been the heart of this place, while I was trying to be its brain." Thomas walked slowly to the front of the room. The crowd parted respectfully. When he reached the podium, he looked at Harrison, then at the assembled employees. "Mr. Blackthorne," he said, his voice carrying surprising strength, "I accept your apology, freely and completely, and I'm grateful for your offer." He paused. "But I need you to understand something. The work I do, whether it's mopping floors or listening to someone who's struggling, it's never been meaningless. Every task done with love has meaning. Every person, regardless of their position, has infinite worth." He turned to address the room. "I'll accept this new position, but on one condition. We don't just change titles and salaries, we change how we see each other. The security guard who keeps us safe, the cafeteria staff who nourish us, the cleaning crew who create a space we can work in, they're not beneath anyone. They're essential. They're family." The room erupted in applause. Harrison stepped back from the podium, and for the first time in his professional life, he wasn't the center of attention, and it felt right. "There's one more thing," Thomas said as the applause died down. "Mr. Blackthorne's daughter Emma is recovering in the hospital. I'd like to suggest we take up a collection, not of money, but of time. Sign up to help the family, bring meals, run errands, whatever they need. Because that's what a real company does. We support each other through the valleys." The sign-up sheet filled within minutes. Over the following weeks, Emma's recovery progressed steadily. Harrison spent every evening at the hospital reading to her, playing quiet games, simply being present. He delegated the Singapore acquisition to his team, missing his first major deal in 15 years. He didn't care. Thomas visited regularly, bringing small gifts, a wooden cross he'd carved, a collection of children's Bible stories, a stuffed lamb that Emma immediately named Wooly. He and Harrison would sit together while Emma slept, talking about everything and nothing. "I keep thinking about what you said," Harrison mentioned one evening, "about finding meaning in loss. I almost lost Emma, but I don't know how to describe it. Found yourself, Thomas suggested. No, I think I found something bigger than myself, something I'd been running from my whole life. Thomas smiled. Faith has a way of finding us when we stop running. Is it always this, overwhelming? At first. Then it becomes like breathing, natural, necessary, but never taken for granted. Emma stirred in her bed. Daddy, is Mr. Thomas here? I'm here, sweetheart, Thomas said. Will you tell me another story about the lost sheep? Thomas pulled his chair closer, his worn Bible appearing from his pocket. Of course. See, there was this shepherd who had 100 sheep. Harrison watched them, his daughter's eyes bright with attention, Thomas's voice gentle and sure. 3 weeks ago, he would have scoffed at the scene. Now he recognized it for what it was. Holy ground. The door opened quietly. Melissa entered with Dr. Reeves. Good news, the doctor announced. Emma's latest scans are clear. The swelling is completely gone. She can go home tomorrow. Emma cheered weakly, but enthusiastically. Can Wooly come too? Wooly can definitely come, Melissa laughed, tears streaming down her face. And Mr. Thomas, can he come visit? Any time you want, sweetheart, Harrison said, looking at Thomas. Any time at all. 6 months later, Meridian Financial's annual shareholder meeting took place in the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel. Harrison stood at the podium, delivering his report. The numbers were strong, not as aggressive as previous years, but solid, sustainable. This year, we implemented something unprecedented in our industry, he announced. We created a comprehensive employee well-being program led by our Chief of Facilities and Employee Well-being, Thomas Whitmore. The results speak for themselves. Employee retention is up 40%, productivity has increased across all departments, and perhaps most importantly, employee satisfaction scores are the highest in our company's history. He clicked to the next slide, showing a photo from the company picnic. Thomas stood in the center, surrounded by employees from every level, all laughing at something he'd said. We learned something vital this year. Success isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the people who make those numbers possible. Every person. From our newest intern to our most senior executive, from our security team to our maintenance staff, every single person matters. In the audience, Thomas sat with the facilities team, uncomfortable in the suit Harrison had insisted he wear for the occasion. But he was smiling, that quiet, knowing smile that Harrison had come to treasure. Some of you might wonder if this soft approach has weakened our competitive edge, Harrison continued. Let me be clear, we're stronger than ever, because we're not just a company anymore. We're a community, and communities can weather storms that would destroy mere corporations. After the meeting, Harrison found Thomas on the terrace, looking out at the city lights. Not bad for a janitor, huh? Harrison joked. Not bad for a man who found his way, Thomas replied. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the skyline. Emma asked me something yesterday, Harrison said. She asked if God makes bad things happen to teach us lessons. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't think God makes bad things happen, but he can use them to help us see what we couldn't see before, to break us open so light can get in. Thomas nodded approvingly. Leonard Cohen wrote something similar, about cracks being how the light gets in. Dear janitor who quotes Leonard Cohen, Harrison mused, I had you all wrong. We all have each other wrong at first. That's why grace is so important. It gives us second chances to see clearly. Harrison's phone buzzed. A text from Emma with a photo, her and Melissa at home, making cookies, flour everywhere, both grinning widely. The message read, Daddy, hurry home. We're making your favorite. Go, Thomas said, seeing Harrison's face soften. That's what matters. Come with me. Emma would love it. Thomas shook his head. Tonight's for your family, but Saturday, I'll bring my famous chili for dinner. It's a date. Harrison paused at the door. Thomas, that morning when you were mopping and I was mocking you, were you angry? Thomas considered the question. Disappointed but not angry. Why not? Because I could see your pain, even if you couldn't. Men don't build walls that high unless they're trying to keep something out. Or in. He turned from the window. I prayed for you that morning, you know. Before everything happened, asked God to help you find whatever you were looking for so desperately. And you think he answered? What do you think? Harrison thought about Emma, alive and laughing, about Melissa, their marriage stronger than it had been in years, about the peace he'd found in the most unexpected place, surrender, about the community that had formed at work, the walls that had come down, the humanity that had flourished. I think he answered in ways I never could have imagined. Thomas smiled. He usually does. As Harrison drove home, he passed the hospital where everything had changed. He thought about that terrible day, about Thomas appearing in the doorway with coffee and comfort, about the valley of the shadow of death, and the unexpected companion who'd walked him through it. At a red light, he noticed a small church on the corner, its doors open for evening service. On impulse, he pulled into the parking lot. He sat in his car for a moment, gathering courage. Then he walked inside. The sanctuary was simple, nothing like the grand cathedral his parents had dragged him to as a child. A few dozen people sat in worn pews, singing a hymn he vaguely recognized. He slipped into the back row, feeling conspicuous in his expensive suit. An elderly woman beside him smiled and handed him a hymnal pointing to the verse. He began to sing, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. The words were about storms and anchors, about hope that holds when all else fails. After the service, the pastor, a young man with kind eyes, approached him. "Welcome. I haven't seen you before." "First time," Harrison admitted. I'm new to this." "We all were once. I'm Pastor James." "Harrison." They shook hands. "I work with Thomas Whitmore. He mentioned this was his church." Pastor James's face lit up. "Thomas, he's one of our pillars. Has been for 20 years. He leads our Tuesday morning prayer group, you know." "Tuesday mornings." Harrison's chest tightened. Every Tuesday morning, while Thomas had been mopping floors and enduring mockery, he'd already spent an hour praying for others, including, apparently, the very executives who ignored him. 5:30 sharp, before work. "You'd be welcome to join us." I'd like that." As Harrison left the church, his phone rang. "Thomas, heard you stopped by the church tonight. Word travels fast. Small community. Pastor James said you're thinking about joining our Tuesday group, if you'll have me." "Harrison, the ground is level at the foot of the cross. Everyone's welcome. Even former mockers? Especially former mockers. They tend to make the most passionate believers." Harrison sat in his car, looking at the church's simple wooden cross illuminated against the evening sky. "Thomas, why did you really come to the hospital that day?" There was a pause. "Because 23 years ago, when I was screaming at God in a different hospital, a stranger came and sat with me, a woman I'd been rude to at a grocery store the week before. She sat with me while David died. She never said why she came, but I knew. Sometimes God sends us to each other. Sometimes the person we wronged becomes the person who saves us. And you're passing it forward. That's all any of us can do, receive grace and pass it on." Harrison started his car, heading home to flower-covered girls and burned cookies and a life he'd almost missed while building his empire. "See you Tuesday morning then, 5:30 sharp. I'll save you a seat." As he drove through the familiar streets, Harrison thought about circles. How mockery had turned to mercy, how humiliation had led to humility, how a moment of cruelty had become a pathway to kindness. He thought about Thomas, faithful in small things, trusted now with greater things. He thought about valleys and shadows and the light that finds its way through cracks. Pulling into his driveway, he saw Emma's face in the window, watching for him. She waved excitedly, flower in her hair, joy in her eyes. Behind her, Melissa appeared, smiling, holding a tray of definitely burned cookies. He parked and sat for a moment, overwhelmed by gratitude. 6 months ago, he'd stood in a hallway, drunk on his own importance. mocking a man for believing in something greater than success. Now he understood what Thomas had known all along. Success without soul was just sophisticated emptiness. Power without purpose is meaningless. And sometimes the janitor sees more clearly than the director because he's not blinded by his own reflection. "Thank you," he whispered, not to himself, not to the universe, but to the one who Thomas had faithfully served while mopping floors and emptying trash cans and showing grace to those who deserved it least. Emma opened the front door. "Daddy, we made 12 cookies and only burned 11. "That's my girl," he laughed, scooping her up, careful of her still healing head. "One perfect cookie is all we need." Mr. Thomas says God cares more about our hearts than our perfection. Mr. Thomas is right. Is he coming Saturday? He is, with his famous chili. Good. I want to show him my new drawings. I drew the hospital and the angels I saw. Harrison's breath caught. Angels? When I was sleeping but not sleeping. There were angels, and one looked like Mr. Thomas but younger. He said I had more pictures to draw, more cookies to burn, more hugs to give. Harrison held her tighter, believing in things he couldn't see, trusting in mysteries he couldn't explain, grateful for a janitor who'd showed him that sometimes the last become first, the mocked become the teachers, and the valleys we fear become the places where we finally learn to see. Inside, Melissa had set 3 places at the dinner table, burned cookies piled on a plate like sacraments of imperfection. They sat together, holding hands while Emma said grace, a prayer she'd learned from Thomas. Simple words about daily bread and forgiven debts and kingdoms coming. Amen, they said together. And in that moment, in that ordinary house with its burned cookies and imperfect family, Harrison understood what Thomas had been trying to tell him all along. The kingdom wasn't coming someday, somewhere else. It was here, now, in every act of love, every moment of grace, every second chance offered and received. It was in janitors who prayed for those who mocked them. It was in executives who learned to kneel. It was in hospitals where hope refused to flatline. It was in a little girl named Emma who saw angels and drew pictures and burned cookies and believed that everyone, even her important, formerly arrogant father, could learn to love better. "Daddy?" Emma asked, cookie crumbs on her chin. "Are you crying?" "Happy tears, sweetheart, the happiest tears." Dot. And somewhere across the city, in a modest apartment, Thomas Whitmore sat reading his worn Bible, preparing for Tuesday's prayer meeting, smiling as he added one more name to his list of people to lift up. Harrison Blackthorne, former mocker, new brother, fellow traveler through valleys toward light. The mop handle knew the weight of faithful hands. The executive office would learn the same. And grace, like water on marble floors, would spread wherever it was poured, cleaning everything it touched, reflecting light in places that had known only darkness. 5:30 Tuesday morning arrived with unusual warmth for the season. Harrison stood outside the church's side entrance, holding 2 cups of coffee, black, no sugar. Thomas appeared from the shadows, his Bible under his arm, surprise flickering across his weathered features. "Brought you coffee this time," Harrison said, offering a cup. "Full circle," Thomas murmured, accepting it gratefully. Inside, 7 others had gathered in a small room. A nurse coming off night shift, a teacher before school, a retired policeman, a young mother with a sleeping infant, 2 construction workers, and a teenager who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Everyone, this is Harrison," Thomas said simply. No titles, no positions, no hierarchy. They welcomed him with nods and quiet greetings. The nurse, still in scrubs, smiled tiredly. "Thomas has told us about you. We've been praying for Emma. She's doing well, thank you." They formed a loose circle, some sitting, some standing. Thomas opened his Bible but didn't read from it. Instead, he looked at each person. "Before we start, does anyone have something weighing on them?" The young mother raised her hand tentatively. "My husband lost his job yesterday. We don't know how we'll make rent," the retired policeman spoke next. "My brother's cancer is back." The teenager, surprising everyone, mumbled, I'm failing math, and my dad says I'm worthless. One by one, burdens were shared, not performed or presented, just offered like stones placed in the center of their circle. Harrison listened, struck by how these struggles made his previous obsessions with acquisitions and market shares seem almost quaint. When his turn came, he hesitated. "Okay, I'm learning how to be present, how to see people, really see them. It's harder than any deal I've ever negotiated." Thomas nodded. "The hardest trades are always with ourselves, trading pride for humility, control for trust, success for significance." They prayed then, not the formal, distant prayers Harrison remembered from childhood, but conversation, like talking to someone in the room. Different voices, different styles, but all genuine. When they prayed for the teenager, the construction workers offered to tutor him. When they prayed for the young mother, the nurse mentioned her church's emergency fund. Prayer became action before the words finished echoing. As the meeting ended, people preparing to face their days, Thomas pulled Harrison aside. "There's something I never told you about that day at the hospital." Harrison waited. "When I heard about Emma's accident on the news, they didn't mention names, just that a child was critical. I came because—" Thomas paused, choosing his words, "because God wouldn't let me not come. It sounds strange, but I felt compelled, like my feet were moving before my mind decided." "You think God sent you?" "I think God sends all of us to each other all the time. We just usually miss it because we're too busy or too proud or too afraid." He picked up his Bible, its leather soft as cloth. "That morning, you mocked me. I saw something in your eyes. Fear dressed up as arrogance. I've worn that costume myself." "When you had your company?" Thomas nodded. "Whitmore Construction. 43 employees. I thought I was building an empire. Turns out I was building a tomb. When David died, I realized I'd buried myself in success long before I buried my son." They walked out together into the morning light, the city beginning to wake around them. "The company?" Harrison asked. "Sold it. Gave most of the money away. Kept enough to live simply. Found this job at Meridian because I wanted to serve instead of be served, to clean up messes instead of making them, to be invisible enough to really see people. For 16 years. The best 16 years of my life. Until now." Thomas smiled. "Now I get to do the same thing with a title that makes people listen. Funny how that works." They reached the parking lot where their cars waited. Harrison's Tesla, Thomas's 20-year-old Honda. "Same time next week?" Harrison asked. "Lord willing." "Thomas, the teenager in there. Would it be inappropriate if I offered him an internship? Paid, of course. Emma's college fund could wait a year." Thomas's eyes crinkled. "I think that would be exactly appropriate. His name's Marcus. Brilliant kid. Just needs someone to believe in him. Like someone believed in me. Like someone believes in all of us." That afternoon, Harrison called Marcus's family. By evening, the teenager had not only an internship but a tutor, Harrison himself, who discovered he remembered more math than he'd thought. They met at the Blackthorn home, where Emma insisted on helping by drawing pictures of numbers with faces. Melissa watched from the doorway as her husband, still in his suit, sat on the floor with Marcus, explaining derivatives while Emma colored and occasionally offered 7-year-old wisdom. "Daddy's different," Emma told Marcus seriously. "He used to be important. Now he's nice." "Emma!" Melissa scolded, but Harrison laughed. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said. "She's right, Marcus. I used to think being important was the point. Turns out being useful is better. Being kind is best." Marcus, overwhelmed by the attention and the beautiful house and the executive who knew his name, just nodded. But later, when Harrison drove him home to his family's cramped apartment, the boy said quietly, "Mr. Whitmore was right about you." "What did he say?" "That you were a good man who got lost for a while, but you found your way back." "Still finding it," Harrison admitted. "Every day, still finding it." As he watched Marcus disappear into his building, Harrison thought about Thomas's words, how God sends us to each other, a janitor to a director to a struggling teenager, a child's accident to wake a father's soul, Circles within circles, grace upon grace. His phone buzzed. A message from Thomas with a photo, the sunrise from the church parking lot that morning, light breaking through clouds in golden streams. The caption read, "Every morning, mercies new." Harrison saved the image, then drove home to his family, to his life, to the thousand small redemptions waiting in ordinary moments, in burned cookies and math homework, and Tuesday morning prayers, and the eternal possibility that anyone, anywhere, could change direction, could choose humility over pride, could discover that the janitor they mocked might just be the angel sent to save them. The mop and the briefcase, the overalls and the suit, the servant and the served. All of it leveled, all of it raised, all of it held in hands scarred by love and worn smooth by grace. This was the story Thomas had been writing with his life for 16 years, punctuated by the rhythm of mop on marble. Now Harrison was learning to write his own verse in that same eternal story, the one about last becoming first, about pride falling and humility rising, about valleys that become mountains when seen from the right angle, with the right eyes, accompanied by the right guide. The story that never ends, only deepens, one Tuesday morning at a time, one prayer at a time, one transformed heart at a time, forever and ever. Amen.